everyone. Welcome to our June Avid noon lunchtime talk. We're really excited to be joined today by one of Avid's partners, Yellow Athletic, and the medical advisor for the company, Dr. Morgan Camp. Dr. Morgan Camp is an integrative functional medicine provider, and he's going to focus today on CBD and THC for recovery. We have some planned questions that we're going to go through, but we'd love to make this interactive. So as people have questions or thoughts, please feel free to put them in the chat, and I'll share your comments or questions with Dr. Camp. So with that, do you want to say anything more about you and what you do before we launch in?
Sure, Veronica. Yes. So I've worked in integrated functional medicine since basically I started my residency. So starting somewhere around like 2001, 2002 in residency. So my practice, basically, I use anything that works. I'm an empiricist. So whatever works, I use it, from herbs, vitamins, supplements, prescriptions, etc. So whatever works. So I have vast experience using all kinds of treatments, treating everything from chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, neurological illnesses, autoimmune illnesses. One of my main specialties is hormones and bioidentical hormone replacement. Do a lot of work with peptides, and I've been using CBD off and on since, I don't know when, at least a decade or so for now. Even longer than that, because I personally started using it when I had neurological Lyme. I had a very severe case of neurological Lyme starting in 2011. So I used a lot of CBD then, and have used it in my patient population since then as well, with and without THC. And now I'm the medical advisor for Yellow Athletic CBD. Because I found a good product that works that I can recommend to clients, and and we'll talk more about that later, why I like the product, etc. Happy to dive in, answer questions. So if your audience has any specific requests, please, I'll do my best. I can't say that I know every study on the planet. Again, I'm an empiricist. I study a lot, but man, trying to remember all the studies for all the different treatments I do sure gets hard to remember all those, but I'll do my best to answer questions. But I thought most of it would focus on like the practicality of the hows and whys and what to treat today, and go through my experience with that. And this is very valuable because I have so many patients who I try to help them with CBD and THC. And in a doctor's visit, it's just hard to even go over all the things that we can talk about here today. So it's really nice to have this time to go over it in depth. So great. I think that. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, we'll just launch in, and don't feel free to answer more than just the question I ask you. Your experience, like you said, is the most valuable thing. So can we start out with some basics? What do CBD and THC do in the body, and how does that help with pain and inflammation?
Good question. On the very basic level, CBD and THC work within what's called the endocannabinoid system, which is a complex system that has receptors both within our central nervous system in our brain and spinal cord area, but also in our peripheral nervous system and our immune system. Basically, the endocannabinoid system interacts with pretty much everything in our body. So it has some influence on everything in our body. And we have internally produced cannabinoids, and basically THC and CBD are working on these receptors. So funny enough, THC works on what's called the CB1 and CB2 receptors. And CBD works on those receptors, but not directly. They work indirectly on those receptors, basically modulating the effect of those receptors for THC. So, and those receptors have a large influence on inflammation. So we know THC alone has a lot of benefits on inflammation, as does CBD. And also CBD works on certain inflammatory cytokines. So if everybody's familiar with like cytokine storm from COVID, CBD does work on some of those cytokines. It works on some, but not all. So there are more and more studies coming out showing which of those CBD is working on. They do seem to have synergistic effects. And I would like to expand, beyond just THC and CBD, but also terpenes. So terpenes are the volatile organic chemicals that give cannabis its unique odor. So, a certain strain of cannabis has a skunky odor or a sweet odor. And these are the chemicals in there called terpenes. And they actually also help modulate the anti-inflammatory effects of THC and CBD also. And some more and more studies are showing that they have just as much influence on the effects of THC and CBD as THC and CBD itself. Yeah.
So are the terpenes separate molecules or it's part of the same?
Yeah, they are separate molecules. Like one is called limonene, and as the name implies, it smells like it gives a citrus odor. There's one called caryophyllene, and that is also found in black pepper and cinnamon and other things. So it also gives benefits. I don't know if you're familiar with this or not, but I do supplement advising on making formulations, and we often put black pepper in formulations as it increases the anti-inflammatory effect and the absorption of other nutrients when we add it in there. And it's probably because of this beta caryophyllene in there. Yeah. Yeah. But more and more studies are showing that those are acting uniquely and separately. So we'll talk more about that later, and how that's unique for the Yellow Athletic products, and why that's something you really want to pay attention to when you're deciding which products to purchase. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, let's go there a little bit more. So how can they be used separately, THC and CBD?
Good question. So, what I advise, so, we should probably break the conversation down into like acute pain and chronic pain. Because those definitely have unique, one thing, if you hit your hammer on your finger and you're hurting, that's going to require different treatment than, say, someone you treat regularly for a low back injury or shoulder injury or nagging sports injury, right? So let's maybe start more focusing on those latter group, the chronic pain patients, because now I don't know if you're familiar with this, 1 in 6 adults in the world have chronic pain now. So it's such a massive epidemic. And I played football for 12 years, and I've had so many chronic injuries myself, and and mostly have recovered from that and only have a little bit of pain now. But yeah, those are completely different subsets. So the way I like to think of CBD is like as a good long-term preventative strategy for inflammation, but also to lower, bring the pain, like the baseline pain, down. So that's how I like to use CBD. I like to use it on a daily basis by the clock, not like when as needed, but like take it 2 to 3 times a day. And we'll talk more about frequency and dosing later, but dosing it 2 to 3 times a day, just around the clock, to sort of bring that baseline inflammation and baseline pain level down. And I find with patients, when we do that for maybe 7 to 14 days, or maybe a month in certain cases, that all of a sudden, they need less acute pain management because the chronic pain is coming down. So of course, CBD, as you and I know, but a lot of people don't know, doesn't actually give you a high, right? So CBD alone can be used at work and driving and in your family life and in your normal life. And for most people, they won't really have a noticeable change in mood or behavior at all, and not much of a high at all. Not much of a high period with just CBD, unless they're getting a product that's somehow mislabeled or contaminated with THC. So that's how I like to use CBD, is like around the clock, as a preventative and long-term strategy. And also is perfectly fine to use during working hours, etc. Now, THC, when do I add that in? CBD is going to help with the nagging little aches and pains, but if you've got a herniated disc that just flares up when you turn a certain way, you're going to need more pain management than the CBD is going to allow. If you've got a 9 out of 10, you got a shoulder injury that's causing you massive problems, you're going to need probably more than the CBD. And that's when we add in the THC. That's when I recommend adding in THC. Another way to do it is just to take, try the CBD alone for 7 to 14 days, see how that works, and then add in the THC as well. And then, so then using the THC alone, yeah, that of course can be used for just acute pain in situations where, being high or being at your best performance wise is not necessary, right? Days off of work or evenings, etc. And we can go through and look at the different ratios of CBD to THC and how I dose those and how I recommend that. And we can go through that as well. But does that answer your question first off?
Yes, that was really helpful. One question about how you were saying CBD doesn't give you the high. Is there a neurodepressant effect? Because some people use it for sleep, right? Do you
Yes.
find with certain doses you're getting too sleepy?
Absolutely. And Veronica, that's one of the harder things to figure out is like what dose causes that drowsiness. It's a little variable and it's quite variable in people. And what it's also can be that a small dose can make you a little calmer. Then if you go up higher in the dose, it might make you more alert. So it's a bit of can be a U-shaped curve a bit. So you have to pay attention to that. I certainly have overdosed myself at times. It's trying to sleep with it and taking too much and actually stimulated me. So too much isn't always better when you're talking about sleep. A lot of people also find CBD helps with, calming, worry, racing mind, anxiousness, feelings, etc. But a lot of times the CBD, the depressant effect, I'll break that down into two things. The depressant effect for a lot of products is related to the terpenes. So like the terpenes that we use in that Yellow Athletic in the Anytime Recovery product, I don't find them to be sedating at all for me. I can take those without much of any sedation. The second part to answer your question is the neurodepressant effect. That's probably one of the only side effects I hear from certain people is some people feel depressed if they take CBD. And I've heard that from a few patients and friends. I'm not sure if it really happens, if it only happens when you're using really poor products. It's hard to discern that sometimes, but I've heard from certain people that they do feel a little depressed on CBD and then it doesn't work for them. But that's about the only real side effect I've heard from most people taking CBD.
Okay. Do you think that the delivery mechanism or the product actually matters, whether you're taking a gummy or there's a lot of CBD sodas at the corner store now.
Great question. I don't think the vehicle for entry matters as much as the source of the CBD. So a lot of less expensive products will use less expensive CBD isolates and things like this versus a full spectrum CBD formula. So I do think there are vast differences basically on what they're putting in the CBD product. And also there is a bit of an entourage effect, right, between different cannabinoids. So we're talking about CBD and THC, but of course there are other cannabinoids too, which will have influence on neurological function as well, like CBG and other products. So some of the Yellow Athletic, we combine those in there too. So you get more of a benefit for those too. So that's why this is so complex, because the soda you drink might say CBD on it, it might say a large milligram, but what's the source of it? Are they using any terpenes? Are there any other useful cannabinoids in there or not? That's why I advise people, to find a really good product and stick with it, especially if you're in chronic pain and you want to get a regular, consistent lowering of that baseline pain that you have. Find one good product and stick with it. Yeah.
Okay, well, maybe that's a good time to ask that question because I see it coming up in the chat too. How do you evaluate the products that are in front of you?
Oh, good question. So again, looking at the chemical composition of the CBD, that's one step. Two,
and what are you looking for?
Well, a lot of these, a lot of the cheaper products are just basically they get CBD isolates that they turn into a chemical powder, and then they add it back to liquids. I find that to be like the lowest quality products. Yeah, and especially if it's just a CBD isolate by itself. So again, I like to use the entourage effects, so you're getting a broader spectrum of cannabinoids in the product. So that's the first thing I'm looking for. Second is, are there terpenes added? Now, terpenes are naturally found in the flowers, but when you extract the CBD, the terpenes are lost. So you have to add them back in. So no CBD product you get that's not a flower is going to naturally have the terpenes in there. They do have to be added back in. So of course I'm looking for that. The other thing is, what's the milligram, what's the strength, what's the dose? And then finally is the dosing legit? Do they have a third party that analyzed it? Is the milligrams of CBD on the bottle actually what's in the product or not? Or, is it legit basically? So did they have good third party testing on the products? Yeah.
Okay. And I guess the same question could be asked for THC. Someone asked, how do you find the right strains for you?
Good question. That's all related. Funny that the true answer is it's all related to the terpenes. It really is. I saw in preparing for this talk, I saw a study where they looked at the difference between indica and sativa, right? So sativa is more stimulating, energizing, and indica is more sedating and calming. They couldn't see any difference in the genetics between the plants, nor the THC or any cannabinoids. It's all was in the terpenes. So the indica's terpenes are what's calming you and sedating you, and the sativa's terpenes are what's elevating you. This is what studies are showing now more and more. So yeah, one of the things you can look at is again, look at the different terpene profiles for what you're looking for and try to find the cannabis that goes along with it. That makes sense at all? Did I answer that clearly? Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I think maybe another question would be how do we know what terpenes are what? But
no, and that's the hard part. And that's more and more, a lot more and more research is happening on that topic right now, probably because more and more companies will start using them even in non-cannabis products, just using the terpenes by themselves. Because they can be that potent. So yeah, it's beyond my memory and knowledge base to go through all the terpenes. Okay. It's really easy to do a Google search. What are the terpenes for, calming and sedation, and the strains that have that, and what are the more energizing strains and terpenes, etc. Very easy to find that information.
Look for the ones that target what you're trying to treat or
exactly, for each unique situation. Exactly.
Okay, that's really helpful. So maybe we can talk about the combinations now. How can these things be used in combo?
Yeah, this is where we really can harness the power of CBD and THC by combining the two, and get a lot better benefit than either one alone. So again, a couple of things before we get started. One, it's important to remember, so CBD is modulating the THC receptor. So for example, if you take a lot of CBD, it will block the THC binding on the CB1 receptor, CB2 receptors. So for example, if you overdose on THC, and overdose meaning you're having psychiatric symptoms, you're not going to die from them. You get psychiatric symptoms if you take too much, right? You go to the hospital, one thing they'll often do is just give you a lot of CBD, because that'll displace the THC off the receptor and kick the THC out and could bring you back to normal. So that's the first thing to keep in mind. So whenever you're everybody has a different tolerance for THC also and its effects, especially psychologically. And also related to your ability to work and function in the world, right? So that's always recommend trial and error. And I'll go through some guidelines, but always trial and error. And I also recommend, very importantly, journal what you're doing. And I'll give you some ideas, and I wrote them down myself here on what you might want to journal and why. Because THC also affects your memory, right? So, it's hard to remember maybe when you took it, how much you took, and whether it really alleviated your pain. So I recommend doing like a little pain journaling around the timing and frequency and dosing that you've used. So we'll go through that.
Oh, so I didn't know that. So THC actually blocks forming new memories.
Well, it can, be associated with memory loss for sure, especially if you're using a high dose for pain. You could, it's pretty easy. Here's what commonly happens, right? One, you're in acute pain, you take some THC, it's not kicking in fast enough, so you take some more, then an hour later it all kicked in and your pain relief is high and you're very high as well, right? And then you can't even remember necessarily when you took it or how much you took the next day. So then you don't, so I recommend having a little journal. That way you can learn how to titrate the dose, meaning adjust the dose of the CBD and THC to meet your own unique needs. So the way I look at it is like CBD to THC ratio. So, starting with like a very high ratio, like CBD 20 to THC 1. So that's going to have very mild pain relief. That's very good for patients with neurological illnesses and, children with seizure disorders, et cetera, usually use those 20-to-1 formulas, but it's not necessarily going to help with a lot of pain. So that's one end of the spectrum, 20-to-1. The other end of the spectrum would be like 1-to-1 CBD to THC, which should give significant pain relief, but is also going to come with a high of THC. Whereas the 20-to-1, you're not going to even notice the THC more than likely. You shouldn't have any high at all. So in between that, so 20-to-1, commonly commercially, you'll find 20-to-1, 12-to-1, 8, 4, 2, and 1 ratios. And as you go along that spectrum, you're going to get more pain relief for acute pain. And of course, you're going to get more high from the THC. So again, it's a complex question because, it's one thing if you're at home all day, and it's the other thing if you're actually working and functioning and trying to find that perfect balance. So if you're working and functioning and trying to find that perfect balance, I recommend people start with the lowest amount of THC possible, and you slowly add in more THC until you find that ratio where, okay, pain is reduced and I'm still able to function at the level I'd like to. I'm still able to think clearly, function clearly, et cetera. Questions?
And they always exist in the same product, or should you try to like split them up so that you could titrate?
Yeah, I often will say split them up so you can titrate. Or even if you have one product. So yeah, if you're going to the dispensary, you can find products that might be 2-to-1 CBD to THC, for example. And you have your yellow athletic or similar CBD on the side. If you take the 2-to-1 and that's producing too much high for you, then you can dilute it by just taking taking the CBD with it at the same time, and that it will effectively change the ratio, right? Yeah,
that makes a lot of sense. I think you kind of answered this already, but if you were a beginner and you were going to start with something, how would you dose yourself throughout the day? Like, in addition to the ratio.
Perfect. Always start on the weekend or a day when you're not working, right? So you don't have any, so that's the first thing. Second thing, start with a CBD, like 25 milligrams, 2 to 3 times a day. The frequency varies. Some people do a little better with 2 doses a day, some with 3. That's how I would start if you're not, and again, taking it daily. So you take it on the weekend, okay, doesn't cause you sedation, you're still able to function, therefore you can use it during the work week. Then try 7 days at that same dose consistently. See how your pain relief and inflammatory symptoms are. And then maybe the next week, double the dose, see how you do for that week. And you'll find that sweet spot on the dose and pain relief. And then you can just stick with that dose. So then that's using the CBD, like again, to bring that baseline pain down. And then of course if you have acute flares, then you can add the THC in. Or if you already know you're in a massive acute pain situation and you need the THC, then I would, then I would start with a higher, a 12-to-1, 8-to-1, 4-to-1 CBD to THC ratio, and then come down on that ratio as needed. But again, making sure you're journaling it, writing down how much you're taking, what's working, because everyone's tolerance for THC is different. And I think one of the main reasons people stop using cannabinoids is because they get too high or they have one or two bad experiences and they don't ever want to have it again and they don't understand why. So to avoid that, if you always have an independent CBD product around, if you overdose, and I've certainly been there. I mean, I had so much pain and surgeries and all kinds of things, and I didn't want to take opiate medications. And so post-operatively, instead of taking, OxyContin, I refused to take that. I would take cannabinoids, and there were certain times, sure, I overdosed on the THC, and wow, that's not always pleasant, right? But if you got your CBD on hand, just take a couple 50 to 100, 200 milligrams of CBD quickly. And, it's not going to work instantly, but 30 to 60 minutes later, you should notice an improvement in coming down from the high. Yeah.
Okay, that's really helpful. I actually had someone come into urgent care recently with a too high complaint.
Exactly, right. It's very common.
There's nothing we could really do for you, but you could get some, reassurance, get some CBD. What about timing of the dosage in conjunction with other things like food or other medicines?
Good question. For the most part, the time of onset from dosing to pain relief is likely influenced by dietary intake, right? So if you take it on an empty stomach, you're likely going to get a more rapid onset of pain relief versus taking it with food. It's going to vary somewhat from person to person, 30 to 60 minutes for most people. The liquid tinctures, if you have those, if you want to try to have the onset of pain relief faster, you can try, of course, holding them in your mouth longer. You might get some improvement in that lag time between the dose and the pain relief. But therein lies the hardest problem when you're dosing, again, because most people, if you're in acute pain, you take a dose, you don't wait long enough, because it might take 90 to 120 minutes, 2 hours to you're getting at a really good pain relief. If you're really in acute pain, and I've had herniated disc. I mean, when you're in acute pain, it might take a while and you get anxious and so you take another dose. And again, next thing you know, you're a little high. So, that's the challenge. So that's why you want to, rather than taking this like an ibuprofen or an OxyContin or something like that, which you're only taking for pain, better if you take it around the clock to prevent those massive peaks in your pain so that you don't get behind the schedule on your pain meds, right? So that you're a little bit ahead of it so it doesn't get such a sharp, intense pain. Yeah. Does that make sense at all?
Yeah, that's really helpful. We have some questions from the chat. I'm going to.
Oh, please.
You. Are there other natural products / plants we can take for either pain or focus in states where it's difficult to get CBD or THC? Oh, so this person's asking specifically about focus and concentration, which, not specifically recovery, but if you want to answer that.
Well, first thing I'll say is you can pretty much get CBD, I think, in any state now. So that, as long as it's the low THC version, so you can. And at Yellow Athletic, we actually have a focus product that has ginseng in it. It has a few mushroom extracts in it. It does help a lot with focus. I often take it before talks and presentations, as I definitely have a noticeable improvement with it. So that is a very complex question and one of my specialties. It's usually the focus issues are usually very person to person dependent. So yeah, there are a ton of nootropics, and there's whole websites and businesses devoted to those. Long story short is, yes, there are a ton of products, but it takes a lot of trial and error to necessarily find what might work for you. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Next one, for geriatric people, is CBD a good option for chronic pain?
Absolutely. I've been talking to our staff at Yellow Athletic. I think this is the best area of use of CBD in the current market because there's so many elderly patients or people now who are just in chronic pain. I mean, who are taking dangerous medications. I don't know if you saw this as much in your training as I did, but how many people have gastric bleeding and kidney failure from NSAIDs, just from taking freaking ibuprofen and acetaminophen? People are getting liver damage and just major, this is an epidemic issue of just the over-the-counter pain meds causing so many side effects and so many problems. They're actually leading to the deterioration of the organs in the elderly and causing a lot of problems for them. So CBD would actually lessen the need for those very toxic medications. So this is a very good use for CBD. And again, there are virtually no side effects from it. I find you asked earlier about sleep. You know, I know a lot of elderly people have sleep issues and insomnia issues. And one of the reasons is actually pain, whether people are aware of it or not. A lot of times they're waking up and the little achiness wakes them up when they roll over or toss and turn. So that's often why CBD helps with sleep also. It can be a little calming to the nervous system, but also just, again, brings that baseline pain, inflammation, and aches and pains down, I find, if you take it regularly. In the geriatric population who sleep and pain are major issues, those two are related. When you don't sleep well, you often have more pain.
Yeah. Well, yeah, let's bring that point back to the performance side, because not just in geriatric populations, I see a lot of athletes who routinely take NSAIDs before they run or do any activity. And I stand on my soapbox. I tell them, please don't do that, and the risks and, the internal organs risk. Also, you're not sensing, what's actually happening in your body. So tell us about using CBD in those situations. I know Yellow Athletic actually has a product for performance.
Yeah, good question. Yeah, I did the same. I mean, when I played football, I took freaking ridiculous amounts of acetaminophen, and man, that's not good for you. That's causing so much oxidative damage to your liver, for example. And when you're exercising, you have more you're oxidizing more because you're breathing more, right? So you have more risk of damage to your organs, which might not manifest for a few years to a decade later when you've got unknown cause of kidney disease. And things like this are actually epidemics now. So yeah, huge issue. So yeah, using CBD during performance is not going to affect your performance necessarily either way. It will help with the pain management, of course. I did look at some studies around THC. There's definitely no increase, like it's not performance enhancing like certain drugs might be. It is, THC is banned from the world doping organizations that look at all the professional athletic associations and Olympians, et cetera. But it's mostly, I think, because of stigma, because they have studies showing it's not increasing your athletic performance per se, but it is for surely, if you take it during exercise, after exercise, it's going to help with recovery, which if you recover better, then you're going to be healthier. Your performance will increase over time if you recover better and you can get back to the gym faster after a performance, et cetera. And yeah. Did I answer your question there? I think you had more to.
No, I think that was good. I don't know if there's any studies about, one of the reasons we tell people in sports medicine not to take so much ibuprofen after an injury is it actually blocks your body's healing response. So it's blocking all those prostaglandins, the things we want. I don't know if there's any study on CBD and if it's, not doing that. I mean, it acts on different receptors, so it really shouldn't be. So that'd be another plug for doing that as opposed to the anti-inflammatory.
You bring up a very interesting point, one that I completely forget. Yeah, of course, the acute inflammatory cascade that's being blocked by NSAIDs, right? So what you're saying is that taking NSAIDs is leading more to chronic inflammation because you're not healing acute injuries. Absolutely. That's for sure true. CBD does not contribute to that. So CBD is not really going to block those acute inflammatory cascade at all. Yeah, not at all. Good question. That's one I hadn't really thought of.
Yeah, maybe we should do that study. So let's see. Another one, what is the difference between broad spectrum versus full spectrum?
It's probably the same thing. Yeah, probably just a play on words, different. There's
Okay.
no official regulatory name for these. So, each company's probably using them those terms a little bit differently.
Okay.
But again, I would, encourage whoever asked that question, look in at the products, how many milligrams are in that bottle? Is there a certificate of analysis, meaning a third party investigator looked at it? How many milligrams are in each dropper full that you're taking or in the gummy that you're taking? Make sure you're comparing apples to apples when you're looking at products. Yeah.
Great. We did want to know a little bit, even though it's not athletic enhancing in the regulatory sense, how do you think your performance is affected when you take either of these products?
Good question. Yeah, I've read stories about like NFL players using cannabis like during the games, and I don't. Sounds a little bit risky to me, especially using THC a lot, high dose THC during a performance. I think some people who have ADD or certain things, they might find it increases their focus, but I think the average person is probably not going to help their performance much. CBD, again, it's not affecting your metabolic pathway. So, as forms like producing ATP and energy during exercise, I don't think it's going to affect that in any way, shape, or form. I do think the positive benefits are, again, what we're talking about, like the long-term treatment, making this part of your recovery program, making it part of your daily routine. Because if you're not damaging yourself with NSAIDs and instead healing those acute injuries so that they don't become chronic injuries, then of course your performance is going to go up over time. If you have a performance and normally it take you 3 to 5 days to recover because you're in so much pain and inflammation, if you're using the right CBD and or THC formulations and you recover faster, then you're back to the gym sooner. Then of course you're going to perform better as well on the next performance as well. I've worked a lot with professional athletes, and it's all about recovery and ability to recover and get ready for the next performance. There might be one area where, I haven't seen studies on this, but there might be one area where CBD could improve performance, and that is that it might help your ability to come back down to like a neutral state of mind. So for example, tennis players, I used to work with several very high level professional tennis players, and so I got to studying it a bit. And the difference between like the number 1 tennis player and the number 10 tennis player is which one can bring the heart rate back down to normal in between each set. So if you can bring your heart rate and your heart rate variability back down in the middle of the chaos and all the people cheering and all the things that are happening, you're number 1. If you can't, they're going to beat you. Why? Because your system's getting over revved. Basically, you're redlining your body and your nervous system, and your sympathetic nervous system's draining everything. So if you can switch back to a parasympathetic state, you're going to get much improved performance. And I'm just supposing now that CBD is doing that. I'm pretty sure there is good research, and I can't cite the studies though showing that CBD is improving your parasympathetic state, but I'm pretty sure those studies do exist. Yeah. Yeah, I do a lot of work with heart rate variability and improving that. And those are easy. If any of your listeners want to try out the theory, you can go to heartmath.com and get their, they have a device that in real time helps you measure your heart rate variability and your performance. And you just put it on your ear, and it connects to your Android or iPhone app. And you can you can actually see how your heart rate variability is in real time. So I find that that's like one of the best technologies on the market to use to do that. Yeah.
Yeah, certainly if you're for performance reasons, right? That's
Exactly.
Yeah.
For sleep reasons, for performance reasons, for healing a chronic injury reason. We know if you're, when you use the HeartMath device, they break it down in just green, red, or yellow. If you're in the red zone, that means you're sympathetic dominant. When you're sympathetic dominant, as you know, you can't heal. You're in that fight or flight response. So you got adrenaline release. That's a catabolic state, meaning muscle breakdown. So when you're in a parasympathetic state, you're more anabolic, muscle building, heal and relax, sleep and digest state. Yeah. So
Yeah.
pretty sure CBD is helping you get into that state regularly. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you want to shift a little bit to the products and maybe even telling us a little bit about the Yellow Athletic products and
Sure.
how to choose the right one? And we touched on it a little bit before.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I have I have three here. The fourth one's right over here. I used it before. But so the main one I use is, the main one for most people is going to be the Anytime Recovery CBD, which is just a liquid tincture, has an orange flavor. Yeah, and it has terpenes, which aren't necessarily stimulating, but they're not sedating either. So it's called Anytime, meaning it, you shouldn't notice a change in your energy level going up or down when you take it for most people. And so it's 50 milligrams per serving. So per dropper full, it's 50 milligrams. So again, I recommend starting with like 25 to 50 milligrams. So a half to one dropper full 2 to 3 times a day for that one. This is probably the most popular product here that we sell at Yellow Athletic. It's the warming stick. So this was designed in conjunction with an acupuncturist, and it has Chinese herbs and menthol in here in this base, and you can just apply it directly to any area that you have acutely injured or an acute pain. So you asked about, we asked a lot about athletic performance, where if you have an acute injury and you're still performing, if you put this on before, you're definitely going to perform a little better, because this really, if you've got one area or two areas in your body and you want it to feel better, you just put this directly on there. And this it has a massive dose of CBD. I think it's 6,000 milligrams in this stick right here. And when we did the last certificate of analysis, only actually had 7,000 in it. So it's a massive dose of CBD. So every time you're rubbing it in there, you're getting these Chinese herbs just to get it through the skin and right into your tissue. This only takes 10 or 15 minutes to kick in, and then it definitely lasts a few hours, and you definitely get a nice long acting benefit from it. Yeah, so I really, really like that one. And the opposite, we have a cooling stick too, and that's one that I used just before we talked today because I had a little neck pain. And yeah, it's similar, also Chinese medicine, but it brings a cooling effect instead of a warming effect. Yeah, so those work great. The one I mentioned earlier, these are the gummies that taste great, by the way. These are the Energy Focus CBD Wild Berry Gummies. So these have more terpenes for focus and concentration, but also they have herbs in there, like I mentioned earlier. I believe it's turkey tail, mushroom, and ginseng that help with focus and concentration. Yeah, I love this one. I use this one, before a call or before I have to talk or something where I have to have sustained energy for quite a period of time. And love this one. It's not yeah, you get a benefit from it, but it's not overly stimulating, like you drink too much coffee or anything like that. I don't like being over. Yeah, too much coffee doesn't help my performance at all, right? It actually sabotages it. So yeah, I like this one because you get a little increased focus without like being overly stimulated. And then the last product, which I don't have here, is the nighttime product, which in addition to CBD also has CBN in it. So CBN is a cannabinoid, which has a lot of calming and sleep inducing properties. It's a cannabinoid that does not have a lot of research on it. So I was trying to do a lot of research on it for this. They have research from the 70s saying that it didn't have any calming or any effect on sleep for people in the 70s. But man, if you take CBD, the CBN, it definitely calms me down, makes me sleep. So I don't know where those studies came from. There haven't been a lot of studies in the last few years on it for some reason. But I certainly find it to be very useful as well. Having had a lot of neurological illnesses and also treat a lot of people with insomnia. So I'm always looking for like the best treatments, the best technology, the best herb supplements, etc. for insomnia. And I do like our nighttime product as well. Yeah.
And that's one you have to kind of find the dose that works for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one, it also probably has this U-shaped curve, meaning take the perfect dose and it'll calm you down and put you to sleep. But if you take too much, It might wake you up and stimulate you. So that's the first caveat with a sleep product. The second caveat with a sleep product is, I find this to be the case with a lot of sleep products, but especially with this one, is it will kind of like open a window for you to fall asleep. Meaning, maybe like somewhere 20 to 40 minutes. But if you take it, then you go do something else and you don't go to sleep, you might miss that window, and then it might not help you sleep at that point. Okay. So I do recommend waiting until you're ready to go to sleep to take that one. Don't take that too far in advance, because I found personally, if I take that too far in advance, I'll miss that window, and then it might stimulate me a little bit after that. Yeah. But I'm very sensitive too. I can feel everything. So, which is good and bad. Then I always know what the side effects are of everything, and know the caveats to help people. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you can direct people. That's perfect. I'm going to ask a couple more chat questions as we're wrapping up. Let's see. Would you highlight nanotech edibles, benefits, risks, and do you recommend them? I don't know what those are.
I do not know what those are at all. I've seen different nano products. I mean, a lot of it is just they're using, terms for marketing. They're not necessarily, what is nano in there they're talking about? What is that delivery system and how amazing is it? I haven't seen the data or research on it. Yeah, if anybody has any data or research on it, please send it over to me. I'd love to see it. But yeah, a lot of those things in today's world, they use like, lipolyzed and nano. A lot of that are marketing terms that may or may not actually improve the efficacy of the product. They might, but not always.
Makes sense. Are there any long-term side effects that could happen when taking CBD, THC over many decades?
I certainly have not seen it. Smoking them can, of course, cause lung damage, right? That's probably the biggest risk. And if you're not smoking them, not a lot of risk at all. There's so many reports of doctors who've used cannabinoids for decades, who've treating, cancer patients and people with chronic illness with success, and these people have taken it for decades with no problems. And I have patients in my longevity practice who've taken it for decades and who were actually in great health and no problems at all. So there's not a lot of I personally haven't experienced it, and I've never seen any real legitimate science that shows that it's a risk to take it in the long term.
We do get some patients coming in urgent care that seem to have some gastric side effects from too much THC. Have you seen that?
That I haven't seen at all. Interesting. I'll look and see. I'll just see if I find out the how and why of that, because I do a lot of work with GI health. My guess is what are they eating after they take all the THC, right? Well, that's the issue. How much sugar and sweets and junk food are they eating afterwards? That's the biggest risk, honestly, for me, for using cannabinoids, is you got to be very careful you don't empty the refrigerator, because that's the biggest risk, is eating too much food. And I think that's also related to the terpenes for sure. There's certain terpenes that if I consume them in indicas, I'm so hungry, I can't sleep, I can't do anything. So I refuse I never consume those, period, because I know what it'll do to me.
Yeah, for sure. I think my first ever experience in the medical world was I took care of a lot of cancer patients in residency, and at that point there were Marinol pills that were given in when the acute cancer patients were in the hospital.
Yeah, exactly. I had some patients like that in med school, and I was in the South. I grew up in the South. Yeah, so they were giving Marinol, and it didn't seem to work so well, mostly because I think they were overdosing it. And, these poor little ladies with cancer were getting like a lot of neuropsychological side effects from it. Yeah.
Yeah. Any other questions from the group? This has been really great to, have your answers, but also hear your experience. Any final, words or things you want to close with?
Yeah, the main reason I love CBD is because, again, using it regularly in place of acetaminophen, ibuprofen, opiates is one of the best things you can do. Like as far as preventative health and keeping yourself healthy. So that's why I'm such a huge fan of it. I don't like products that have a lot of side effects. I don't use them in my practice. I try to find the healthiest, most natural products with the least amount of side effects. And again, I run a longevity practice, so I work with people to help them stay alive and healthy as long as possible. And that's also why I like CBD, because it doesn't, we had a question about that. It doesn't cause any long-term side effects. It's safe, it's healthy. If everybody used it rather than a lot of these other products, we'd have a much healthier world with a lot less disease, actually. Yeah.
Well, I think we need to take that message to the medical community, because it's a lot of the doctors that are prescribing those other medications, and a lot of it's just out of comfort or habit and kind of discomfort with knowing what to tell people to do. I think there's still some stigma there. So maybe our next talk should be with other physicians.
Oh, exactly. Yep, absolutely. And it's also a lot of doctors, they don't know the products. And so, yeah, they'll just, again, if you don't, that's why you have to have certain products to tell people, it is, we can say this is a conflict of interest. I'm telling about Yellow Athletic in some way, but on the other level, you got to have a product you can go to in this market, because there's a lot of crap out there, honestly, for lack of a better word. And if you tell people to go take it and it doesn't work, you didn't do anybody a service, so it's imperative. I practice what I preach. I try it, 99.9% of everything I've ever prescribed, I had to either use myself for a medical reason, or if I didn't have to use it, I just tried it so I would know what it was like, and so if doctors would first help themselves, heal themselves, doctor heal thyself, then we'd all be in a much better place, right?
We're often the worst patients. We know that.
Exactly.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Camp. This was fantastic. Thank you to everyone that joined. We're looking forward to future discussions with you and just furthering our partnership. And for anyone who's interested in learning more, I'm just gonna, would you type the Yellow Athletic in the chat? I think it's Yellow Athletic.
Yeah. I've got it right here. I'll just put it over there. Yeah. And if there's, we have a great customer service team too. Yeah. So if there's any questions that we didn't answer today, or questions on products, or, which product to use, or should I start with this one or that one, just reach out to us, and, we'll get back to you. And if the staff doesn't have any answer, they of course ask me, and we'll get it answered for you.
Yeah. And of course, if you're looking for full spectrum sports medicine recovery, we're Avid Sports Medicine. I put our URL in the chat, and we'd love to talk with you and help you recover from any injury, acute or chronic. All right. Have a great day, everybody.
Thanks, Veronica.
Bye-bye.